thanks to everybody who's online. I'm gonna see if I can pop this up and see who's there.
All right.
See 5 participants. Nice
job.
to see Wayne.
Yes.
Basically, some housekeeping first. Appreciate you all being here. Unless you have any burning questions, let's hold those till after I'm through the slide deck, and apologies for going over my 5 to 8. Can't solve all the problems overall with just 5 to 8 slides. Just a few more though. Look out the lucky 13. Basically, I'll interrupt you if I need to get control back so we can continue. And if you have a question, use your virtual hand. And anyway, my disclaimer is pretty straightforward. All right, let's go to the next slide. Basically, this is the part where I sort of front load our conversation a little bit. I will offer some opinions and context. It's a bit dense, but it's the densest slide you'll see. AI is very important to our future. I am not a Luddite. I am definitely one of those people that understands how important AI is and have a lot of background in it from back in the day. Won't go into that now. The internet, in my opinion, needs more transparency and to evolve how it serves humanity, much like AI is doing. I'll just say AI and, in my opinion, and the internet are loosely coupled, but coupled nonetheless. They're going to get a little more tightly coupled as time goes on. Long term, as we continue to shrink our planet, we're going to need to develop some ways to solve problems, nation state to nation state, and as a species, which is not something we've had to do yet ever. Cross-cultural and other kinds of alignments will be really important. Anyway, the context here, I think it's really important to understand that even though it's been swept under the rug a fair amount, nation states and different cultures around the world have had psychological impacts from the information age, really. It's not anybody's fault. It's just how we are constructed, our biology and our anthropology. We'll get into that a little bit. Everything that human beings create most of the time has a double-edged sword to it. There are always benefits and risks to the stuff that really matters. And last but not least, can anybody guess the one time that humanity might have been a little worried on a global basis more than ever before and aware of how small the planet had gotten? I'm not talking about the moonshot. I'm talking about worried.
Early 60s. One Russian guy got the alert to launch and he didn't do it.
That's about right. Basically the missile crisis, the missiles of October, as it was called by Hollywood. Anyway, yeah, let's get going here. This is straight from Davos this week. I wanted to show this really quickly because of one simple reason. These first 3 items to the left there, extreme weather, AI generated content, and societal and political polarization, those 3 weren't, any 3 of those were not on their list last year. If you just go Google the World Economic Forum Risk Report 2023, none of those were anywhere. And even on the 10-year, they usually have this 2-year chart and a 10-year chart. Anyway, you can go look at it. It's very funny, but I just thought I'd show this to you guys because it was last week or maybe now the week before that they released this. Let's talk about the internet's generic business model for a second, because that's really important to the biology thing, believe it or not, because the way we pay for things and monetize things and externalities that creates is really an important thing for our species, because ultimately, the internet's going to be important for the species. The internet is very much not where it was when it began. AI, when it's beginning, is really about, like I have here, creativity, value creation, and curiosity. And that was the only thing you found there. It was very aspirational, and security was not an immediate, not immediately an issue. It certainly is now. The only other thing to point out at this point is maturation. It's taken, well, what's the best way to put this? The internet has basically transformed a lot of industries and disintermediated business models over the course of its, existence. But one thing it does on a consistent basis, and you should all keep this in mind, is no matter what it is, it will lower the costs of it when you're taking that analog activity and turning it into a digital one. It'll make it happen much faster, and you'll basically create more speed in the process. It doesn't matter whether you're buying or selling a car, all the things that I should have a good example for you, but I don't at the moment. Basically, what it comes down to is that speed and ability to make change is pretty much the tenet of the internet. And that last item there is sounds a little Luddite-like, but I think it's an important thing to think about in the context of what we'll get into in a second. Basically, long-term ramifications and externalities abound when you do these kind of things. And, doesn't mean we can't fix them, just means things are moving a lot faster these days. Back to the topic at hand, our history as human beings and our biology, really interesting, because basically what it does is it gives us a starting point, and the digital era is moving so quickly that our biology it doesn't know it's left behind. It's always what it is. There's no way to really change it. Our physiology and our psychology and our cultural history, our anthropology as human beings, really, the last line down there says it all. Fear, anxiety, uncertainty can be created without proper context and in the safety of one's home or anywhere. And that's not something that, has happened very much. We'll continue here on the reason why this is important. When we were hunter-gatherers and we were just getting upright as a species, the flight or fight thing was pretty much front of mind. Over the many generations of human beings as we evolved, the people who had the best and brightest, frontal lobes, if you will, the ability to take information in and act on it, they were the people who survived. They didn't get eaten by the predators or whatever. And that's going way back. And that's largely due to sort of natural selection, I would think. And this is something you guys have probably heard before. But if it isn't, just know that what this does in a collective fashion for the information age is our biology is still pretty much the same as it was 5,000 years ago. If you can imagine for a second, now we're really predisposed to be able to take in information and really want to take it in. And because that frontal lobe of ours helped us with that. And when you talk about the sort of ramifications of this, and there's been some, like I have some links at the end of the presentation, I can send it out to folks, but basically the way our brains are transformed in the process of taking in information and using that information, mostly to do with language. That's where the largest amount of research has been done, neuro-linguistic programming and other, kinds of, hey, what if and we have these big longitudinal studies that go multiple decades and even dream about multiple centuries, you can start to understand that brain function changes based on our intake of information, our use of language, and the way we interact with the world. So that's a really good touch point. We're gonna try and get moving here. I'm going a little slow. Basically, what happens when AI comes on board to the internet space that we've had in the past? And when I say AI, I mean generative AI. I'm not talking about AGI. I'm not gonna even go there with this discussion. But basically, if you start realizing that the whole content universe in the internet is going to change radically within the space of 2 to 5 years, depending on how you look at it, it's going to be very interesting to see how we in our human governance try to get a handle on that. And I'll just point out that, well, we've really never run into the kind of issues that we're going to run into in this context. And there's lots of examples of it. I'll just throw one example. You guys probably know about, you know, that company Snapchat. They have a pair of glasses. They did the Google Glass thing. There's this called Snap, and it's very different interface, but it's still similar. Point is that you can walk around with these Snap glasses, and you know, just like I have my glasses on right now, I could be looking at the sort of heads-up display information that comes back from the cameras that are looking at the room, and you'd be face wrecked and all this stuff, and I'd be able to get, I mean, I could see all this information, right? And you wouldn't know that I was seeing it. And it's a very interesting social, you know, dynamic when you start to consider information disparity. The other really big thing about this internet explosion when it comes to AI, and what I just described is obviously augmented by AI, and the folks at Snap are probably very excited about the product. And anyway, the thing I was going to point out is that the whole idea of what is the truth, what is real, and being able to really identify that in the world and in your mind, because you know, the fact is that fear, uncertainty, doubt thing, if we start being in the position as human beings of trying to prove or disprove to ourselves what is real and what is true, that's a very disruptive psychological and to be honest, physiological eventuality. Anyway, we can come back to that. I really like the Dickens quote. I'm sure you've seen that lately these days. It really is an appropriate first paragraph for a book, I guess, any time in human development. Basically, the one thing I would follow on with here from that last slide is that the sophisticated profiling that came from before AI was here is a real thing. It has to do mostly with privacy and the internet's business model. But that opt-in piece has funded so many big companies and so much information, research, value creation. It's just sort of, you can't, what's the best way to put that? Can't begin to encompass what this really means in the context of our biology. Anyway, basically, I would posit that we may be ill prepared for AI's social and societal requirements, given our past ability to respond to what we've had to do so far in the internet. And maybe there's something that'll change now. But what do we have to, you know, to get away from the, you know, in your face with a lot of information thing? There's a lot of stuff that's coming, and I wanted to touch on two things here in this slide. Basically, AI is going to raise the bar on what we're able to do and when we're able to do it, and will really support the human interest, if you will, if we are doing our jobs right as engineers and technologists and software developers and attorneys in the Beltway who are working for the FCC and the Federal Trade Commission. And anyway, long story there. The interesting thing that all this presents is when there are challenges, there have to be ways to resolve those challenging problems and questions, and they have to do with how human beings are going to do things with respect to this new and fast-moving technology. If you look across the pond at the European Union, there is a tremendous amount of action that's been taken over the last 2 to 3 years. And just this week, the country of Europe, if you will, the European Union, has come out with a bunch of new new drafts of the AIA, the AI Act, the European Union AI Act. And they're really trying to cover a lot of bases. It's pretty interesting. If you ever want to go down the ethics and moral rabbit hole to some of these challenges, that's a great way to do it if you don't mind doing a little reading. Anyway, I think this last sentence really says a lot. If ethical models need modification and are used intuitively, and they're being constantly updated, that's sort of the scenario I was mentioning before, where our realities might be challenged, or our mental faculties or sensibilities, or whatever you want to call them. That's a fast-paced kind of a problem. This is the point where I say, hey, take a read of these things. These are, just pick one. Since I'm a little bit late and it's almost to the top of the hour, I wanted to leave as much time as I could to, have you guys read this, see what you're interested in talking about. And that includes any of those who are still on the phone or on the computer at home or wherever. It's an open question to ask these kind of questions and discuss them. We just take one more quick peek. I know people are reading this, but I'll come back to the screen. Here's a quick glossary too. We can look at that if I just want to point one thing out. Content credentials as a service. That's a buzzword that you will hear a lot about. Basically, that's one of the things that will probably help us at 2024 November, for the election, but nobody really knows. Anyway, we can come back to these. The other thing I wanted to point out is that last couple are talking about the polarization problems that we're having in the United States. It's quite fascinating, and you could argue it has nothing to do with polarization. It has to do with what caused it. And that comes back to my earlier assertion that we haven't really done the job we need to do with the good old-fashioned internet and content management and the ability to, I'm not going to say police, that's too strong a word, but the ability to adjust what it is that's being presented to people in ways that are beneficial to both society and them, and not detrimental to our society and individuals. Sort of a long discussion, but do you guys have any questions about the discussion topics? This is, there's a hand here, but I'll just finish. This is a really complicated and nuanced set of problems that are all interconnected with each other, and it can definitely get your eyes rolling back up in your head, if you know what I mean. But somehow, some way, our species really needs to step up and start saying, okay, we have these problems. We're not going to solve them overnight, but we can still get on the road. There's a very aspirational opportunity for people on the planet right now, especially the ones in the G20 nations that have lots of good internet and have been on the internet using it heavily. Those are the places that these kind of challenges need to be really worked over. And it helps to do that in a cross-cultural fashion, because if you don't have everybody's mind and experience backing up the ideas that they come up with, you're leaving money on the table, if you will. Anyway, what's your question? What's your name?
Well, I'll start with a statement: a lie walks around the world before truth puts on its shoes. And so what you had before is, you know, people referring to, say, Wikipedia and just saying, accepting it as truth, and it's been edited by people and the source material has never been looked at or very rarely looked at. So the large language models then just amplify that, like grabbing the same urban legends and other kinds of stuff, so that the perception is not reality, or at least it's not back to the source.
Mhm.
And so I'm writing trivia questions, and I get people who write trivia questions that use Wikipedia. I say that's not a source. The sources might be pointed to by Wikipedia, but how the language models would dig down into that for better amplification. That's the question. As part of the trust.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I would love to dive into like the large language models and small language models and the new GPT store from OpenAI and all of these really fantastic things that are going on inside of the world of AI right now. But I hate to be a wet blanket, but the fact is that that's what everybody's thinking about. I came here today to challenge you guys to think about the other stuff, the sort of top-down stuff instead of the bottom-up stuff. And it's hard to find people that are doing that, who aren't in the bubble of governance, right? And who don't really know what the bottom-up stuff looks like and don't understand it. And the point being that there's I'll admit that I'm here mostly because of an evangelical desire to present some of these problems at a high level and let other people evaluate those same problems. But you're talking about
Is the high level then like just deep fake in general, or
societal impacts based on the tools that aren't yet fully regulated and probably won't be for a couple of years. That's probably the way to sum it up. But the fact is that that's just one piece of it. If you look at the other piece, which is the sociological, biological, psychological aspects to what happens to societies, and the whole polarization thing, I do have some links and references in the deck, but if you start looking at the research that's been done by Pew and MacArthur Foundation, and you start realizing that they're spending a lot of time and money on understanding what the polarization is being built by in the United States in the electorate, and what that looks like and where it comes from. That's a really hard problem, and yet here it is, a problem that is going to get in front of our free and fair elections, most likely. Not because somebody's working the system inside the election infrastructure, but because of our societal norms. There's two kinds of what I would call biases built into the election, and that is it looks like there's some messages coming in here. Let's see, Wayne.
Oh,
Hey, Wayne,
can we just stop sharing so?
I'm gonna get you in there. Where's the pause share? Oh, stop share. I'll pause it. Is that okay?
Sure, I don't use PowerPoint much, so we can pause it, but I want to see who's there, so.
Okay. Stop sharing. Hey, Wayne,
Yeah, Wayne has his hands up. You want to say something?
let me get you going there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So hi, Dan, good to see you. Sorry, I'm not there in person. I missed the bus. So, there's lots of hand wringing about, of course, AI producing things that are not true. And even worse, that people will read things that are not true and not know. I think the tremendous opportunity is for us to have AI tell you what is a verifiable source. And I don't know if anybody has looked at this, but are there work going on that say, okay, here's something that came from some neural network AI thing, and here's how you dig down to the sources. So you can either fact check by hand, or a fact checker program can say, oh, this is relying on what I already believe to be trusted sources. Therefore, I'm more confident in the output of this. Right.
Yeah, and Wayne, for what it's worth, what you've just described is very much part of the GPT plan, if you will.
It is. Okay.
And that's something that, well, I'll say it this way. The whole large language model investment of big companies and huge amounts of data is very separate from how much the GPT world is going to be able to create value in the context you were just talking about. You're going to have the ability with platforms that are personalized GPT builders, where you can start as an entity, like say you're in a business, or you're a government, or you're some sort of agency in a government. You want to start building a large language model for your purposes. Those are things that are absolutely waiting in the wings, as it were, to be able to do a really great things with AI. And that's why I said in the beginning of the presentation, Wayne, AI is such a vital and important.
Yeah. Well, I mean, probably many of us have, gotten papers back from a high school teacher that said, these are not primary sources, use
Right.
these. And so your teacher, had their idea of what are our bedrock primary sources, and you trust them, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think the problem though is, even if we had these great tools that say these came from these sources, people can say, no, I don't believe those are primary sources and true. For example, I might say that a spiritual text, a divine text, is my source of truth, right? And that conflicts with what you think is a peer-reviewed scientific paper, right? And so, but at least we know what people are drawing from if we could trace that. Because how many online chats and things have you unfortunately stepped into where, oh my gosh, people are yelling at each other and no one has said what their sources are, and that doesn't seem to even help, right?
So I want to interject. So I have the fortune of hearing Ed Chi from Google DeepMind talking about BART.
Right.
So
Okay.
BART is actually now it's going to show you the reasoning process. So then it will tell you where the source comes from. So you can say, wait, that's wrong. Then it could redo, right? So I think part of it is the hidden
real-time
black
sort
box,
of confirmations and trust building.
So I think that's a good move. I
I think
like
it's
that.
telling that, you listen to NPR Marketplace and they'll have an ad for, what is it, C3 AI, and they say they're hallucination free. So they're like putting that in their advertising.
Tells you they're really still early days, as far as the American public or the public is concerned. But, for those who are, AI enabled humans already, it's really very interesting. But back to the Wayne's point about, sources, it's a really nuanced and difficult problem, because you can have, what's the best way to put this? Everybody has an opinion. Whether it's true or not is, something to be determined by many different means, right? Based on the context of the information, based on how much they believe in it. I mean, I'll just say it. We human beings, we're analog creatures, and boy, is it hard for those digital creatures that we're going to birth here to get in front of it. That being said, I mentioned content certification as a service. That's going to be a thing that the big cloud providers are going to be building and offering as a product to the people that are doing GPTs. All of your custom GPTs will have this ability, maybe in the very near future, that they're going to look and say, oh, you know what, it has a certification level of X. And that certification level, let me back off a little bit. When everything's analog, like it is in our news media today, you know, like you have physical magazines or news outlets or bureaus, it's really hard to be able to take things and be 100% sure of them. We've in the past always relied on them being the trusted source. But if you go take a look at the media bias chart that Advantes Media has, if you haven't seen that, I'm sure Wayne, you know about that, right? The media bias chart shows you the arc of what's believable and what their political tilt is and all of the nuanced details associated with that sort of analog source of information. I think that media bias chart is the best we can hope for in the context of human beings being able to be sort of certified with their correctness or their believability. Now, that being said, what's really interesting about that, guess how they build? They don't have large language models to do this kind of stuff. They are very much organic, although I think they just got a funding round, and I think this is public knowledge actually, that at Advantes to maybe build some things that'll help them. Because right now, they have individuals sitting behind a computer and actually going in and doing the work of validating information and actually going and calling people and validating information. It's really pretty that's amazing that kind of stuff is actually having to be done, but that it's being done because that's what's required to get the level of trust that they want to have with the folks that are out there in the world. And it's interesting to think of that. Just think about that one concept for a second. Somebody has to disintermediate sources of information for individual human beings in order to really build that trust. And that tells you how fragile and important this activity is. And if Bard is doing it, if Google is doing it with an audit mechanism, they're not going to necessarily show you all the inferences and the crazy stuff that goes down deep in the bowels, but for certain, you will see a nice stream of sources and validating information. And that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Thanks for sharing. Well, coming back to the what's left of the discussion, I will just pop that up again.
Yeah, okay.
I think I will.
I was trying, but it's very hard when there's two screen.
Shift
How do I get rid of that? Should?
to select to desktop. Shift. Sure.
Should to select to desktop. What?
I don't know. I think our screen has frozen.
Yeah.
At least on the machine.
All right.
Oh, there we go. Okay,
Wait,
I get it. We're back. I was gonna pop up those discussion topics real quick. Yeah. There you go.
can you guys see the screen? Yes, but we
Wayne,
cannot.
can you see the
Yeah.
we gotta switch screens again.
Mm.
Shift.
It's okay, don't worry.
Okay.
What is going on? Can
Hmm.
I do that? Do that?
Swap display is right
Swap
there.
display, okay.
Oh.
No, not that display.
Might want to do that again on the
So wait,
app in the background.
what, they can close those tabs, what?
Oh my.
Wait, okay, sure, fine. What is
We're
it?
getting closer. You might have to hit unpause at
Can
the
I do-
top left there.
Oops, back. All right, where is my mouse? Yay!
Here, let me try
Hey,
something. Oh, you
I
got it,
got
you got it.
mouse. I got my
Okay.
mouse. Close the tab. Okay, fine.
Excellent. I'm gonna do one other thing.
Where's my AI agent for that?
Yeah.
I want AI agent to do my calendar.
So
Alright.
one of the things that I wanted to tease out here was this first one. And the discussion topic is it's a really interesting thing that ex-CU engineering, actually, I guess he was aerospace student, is trying to do they have a technology. Everything's a technology, right? When you put it on a cell phone and you have some software, but a human-facing technology that allows for putting a group of people in a room and going through a very standard set of processes that allow that group of people to create alignments between what their position might be and what other people in the room's position might be. It's think of it as instead of the Socratic forum back in the Greek era of Socrates or Plato, we're going to have something that's a little more high tech, but has results that are really good, at least as far as the testing is done so far. So that's going to be an alignment tool that will get people in a room to come up with what they believe in. And they'll also allow for, well, I'll just say it, a reduction of polarization in society, but society in this case is people who are in that room. If you're sitting there and you have this approach as a human being to being able to not be isolated in your decisions and thought process, but be part of a group and be bought into the group dynamic that exists. And this is a space that we would need a psychologist to be with us today to really sort of fully explore what I'm trying to present. But one of the things I have on that list of well, actually, it might be on another copy of the deck. I'll have to get that to Ellen and she can get it to you guys. But basically, it's a reference to a book that you can buy from Amazon, and it's a book about this process. And it's really exciting for one reason and one reason alone. You can quickly and easily put this process in front of any size group of people and have them participate as a group and build the kind of consensus that minimizes polarization and creates valuable outcomes to everybody who's there, as much as that can happen in a group of disparate, human beings where we are all each our own universe. But that's what civil society has been for hundreds and hundreds of years, and we can easily start doing that in a digital context, in the internet context. We have a challenge to do that, but it's a very exciting time. As far as Wayne or others on the phone, let's just see if anybody's there. Present this view.
Well, I'm wondering, do we have any philosophy majors in the room?
That's really what it would
Right,
take.
because this question of what is true is sort of as old as humans, right?
Very existential.
Right, and I mean, I took some class in that as I think a freshman, and it was, if P, then Q, then if not P, then not Q, that kind of stuff. But it would be really interesting if we could get a philosophy faculty member to collaborate with Atlas, where we can help them understand AI and human computer interfaces, and they can help us understand how classical philosophy fits in with this. Maybe we can come up with some really fun things that either help you figure out what is true or find out that you're hopelessly incapable of knowing what is true.
Well,
Yes, I mean, we invited a philosophy professor, Paul Duke, to the research methods class last semester, and somewhere toward the end, the students start arguing. Like, I don't believe you.
well, if Wayne, I can be asked back to talk to you guys again, you know what I will do? I will take these discussion topics, bring them back, but I will work the process that I just described. It is sort of a book, and there's a guy, and and his wife, and it's on Amazon. But what's interesting about it is not so much the process, but learning about how they built that process and how we human beings are predisposed to certain kinds of responses and behaviors in a group dynamic. And that's I'm just going to say it, the couple of different, let's see if I can go back here. Oh, sorry, I was going the wrong way.
Dan, when you finish that thought, I have something to add.
Sure. Basically, I was just going to say that these last couple of things, affective polarization. Affective polarization is essentially, with a capital A there, is when you're an internet user or you're going through some sort of digital media and you're on your own. And this is just my sort of take on it. The way you get polarized is you don't have any other kind of context but your own. And it's sort of that, echo chamber that we all are unto ourselves. And that's what these people, I don't have the link to the scholarly paper I was reading through this, but I definitely want to make sure you guys get a copy of it, because that's probably the most important next step for AI and the digital world, to be able to really use AI effectively and not have to worry about the externality of our human biology. That's a big deal. Please share what you were thinking.
So I'm not a psychologist, I'm an electrical engineer, but I'm
Nice.
an avid reader of the psychological and neuroscience literature. And I think there's a couple of really important facts here. So as you're pointing out, we haven't fundamentally changed in a very long time. I would say much longer than 5,000 years.
Right.
There's very small evolutionary changes to our genome, but on the whole, you could wind back the clock tens of thousands of years and we're still approximately the same.
Certainly anthropologically.
Anthropologically.
Yeah.
But our fight or flight, there's actually some really interesting psychological literature on this. There's 4 F's, not just those 2. There's fight, flight, fawn, freeze, or collapse, which is the animal about to be eaten. Mammalian response. I mean, it's ingrained within mammals, and I think in other animals too. But it's relevant because if you look at humanity through this understanding of psychological literature, you see that what we refer to as PTSD, which is associated with veterans coming back from war, is actually incredibly widespread, and the threshold for it to exist within the population is substantially lower than anyone realizes. Anyone who's phobic of needles or the doctor or the dentist, they might have had a traumatic experience, and avoidance of triggers related to the trauma is a way that it manifests, as well as depression and anxiety. And we see a hell of a lot of avoidance, a lot of depression, and a lot of anxiety. Our brains are not built to take in this much information. The other important factor is that the younger you are, the narrower your window of tolerance for stress. So what to an adult seems like something trivial can be traumatic to a child. And now people will literally put iPads in a baby's bassinet with unrestricted internet access. And we don't know what the consequences are going to be for Gen Alpha and beyond growing up on the internet with unfettered internet access.
For what it's worth, I really appreciate you bringing these topics up. I'm glad you dove down there. I put this into one bucket.
Yeah.
And it's probably an appropriate label. Human frailty. Human frailty is a
We are squishy biology.
Yeah, well, let's just say our biology is never far from the surface. And most of the psychological or physiological frailties that we have to work with as a human being are pretty challenging and in Western culture, mostly, never really are given much credence. In other words, you want to get above that noise floor behaviorally in an adult world. And, you know, that whole PTSD in combat thing, there's, what's the best way to put this? There's a universe there of what we maybe want to know about how human development needs to proceed from here out. And I'm not saying it has to happen instantly. I'm not saying the full breadth of what you described, even though it's relevant. Is it expedient or possible to deal with those kind of frailties? And that's a really interesting ask.
My concern is that we have a weak foundation on which we are adding a whole layer of unintended consequences. So that human frailty and our squishy biology in a world that, again, if you do a deep enough dive into the literature, we haven't psychologically recovered as a species from World War II, let alone wars that have happened subsequently. So when you start adding in you're constantly being bombarded with the products of these AI algorithms that try to show us information, as you said, we're visual creatures, we want to take in information, we want to see things. And as a consequence, we're taking in so much stressful information that we're not equipped to handle, that I could see a future where, I mean, you already see it now, the level of stress and burnout across cultures, across the world, pandemic aside. And now again, we're going to now accelerate that even further with AI.
Let me give you two things. Number one, great analog to what you're talking about is what happens when you're on the ISS or a non sort of not, you know, you could actually make it go away by putting a space habitat that had actually a torus and would spin and have artificial gravity. But as soon as you're in zero G, your squishy biology, if you will, turns you into somebody who has to exercise every day, has a physiological requirement to backstop what's happening to your person. It's really amazing. And the same thing, I mean, you could take that analogy into what you're describing. There is no way to avoid the fact that we are human beings. And that's something that not a lot of, a lot of people really want to deal with. Now the flip side of this is the following. And this is the sort of silver lining, the aspirational opportunity. Neuroplasticity and our brain's ability to rewire and to respond and do things that, you know, we don't have any voluntary control over. That's a science that is being shortcutted, if you will, by, you know, Mr. Musk's implant company and other implant companies that are trying to go direct. You know, they're trying to take a human intervention into a function of the human brain. And it's sort of like this horse race, if you will. And it's very, very interesting to concern ourselves with just, you know, just those two kind of concepts, that we're not going to change our physiology and biology. You know, our anthropology, our history, if you will, that's always there too.
We can augment ourselves.
Right. The augmentation concept is really the best label to put on both the internet and the information age for human beings. And
I think there's just that danger there, of course, to augment in ways that are harmonious with our biology instead of ways that are ultimately to the benefit of the people who can capitalize.
the last discussion point I would love to go to is the boiled frog, right? I mean, let's face it, that is such a great analog to the challenge ahead for humanity. And what's interesting about it is this concept of species level emotional maturity. That's a very funny kind of phrase that describes nothing more than being able to act and communicate better with one another and have governance that has the tools to create the kind of alignments that are needed to organize human governance in a way that A, protects, B, enables, and C, allows for development and value to be created. Those are things that human governance have always strived for, but have never really been disintermediated and optimized in any way. So that's the
As you
point,
put it, or second to last bullet,
right?
that's the Star Trek future, right? We all work together towards a common goal instead of
Yeah,
competing in tribal fashion, as we have done for our whole history, and not just us. I mean, our primate ancestors and our primate cousins still living extant today. We know that chimpanzees will go to war with one another. So there is something built into
our DNA.
our biology, and we are running straight up against it in this race against our own ability to invent technology that could get out of our own hands.
And what's so great about what you just said is that without sort of upping the game as far as governance is concerned, and I truly believe as an engineer who has had tons of time on Capitol Hill and understanding just how special and different some of those things are in Washington, there's an opportunity there to really raise the bar and have governance that is, well, a lot more aligned, a lot broader in its ability to create consensus. And, well, it's enough said. I mean, those two things are huge. That being said, I think because of the boiled frog, we're always going to be a reactive species. We're not ever going to be able to be proactive.
Is there such thing as a proactive species?
That's a great question. I mean,
Has that ever existed?
will
There
it
ever been
exist?
an animal species?
This is the place where we start talking about AGI, because if for some reason we work at it and we realize, oh, we're kneeing out, we can't really get up the curve the way we need to. But the AIs over here, if we all agree to trust them, they will be the continuing part of that curve that we can't traverse. And that's a far future kind of thing. But ultimately, it's great being here in a room where there's a lot of techies that can talk about the sociological, biological, and evolutionary issues that our technology will bump us up against. And it's already happening. And there's very little realization of it in governance. And that's probably the next big step. Anyway, it looks like it's the bottom of the half hour. And let's see if there's anybody still on. I can't.
I think they're always there. I just like,
No, they're
sharing
great.
screen is hard to see. Like,
Excellent.
I can't read up that. Close it for a moment. Yes, people are still there.
Well, is there anybody else on the call who'd like to pipe up? Ask any other questions?
I mean, I guess like my thought on this is like, in regards to your question around consensus building based AI. I guess my thought is that the internet to me is like an inherently disruptive form of technology in that it's like leveling the playing field, it's giving access to the conversation to lots of people. But like structurally, AI is actually like a hegemonic technology, right? Like you're building and restructuring things that already exist. And so in that sense, like a Socratic method based artificial intelligence to me poses the risk of like the broader question around like, are we really wanting to move away from conflict and disruption, or is there value in that? And is there a tendency in these AIs to move towards moderate or hegemonic structures in their consensus building process? Whereas like the internet is giving voice to these disruptive perspectives, you know?